In the early days of May 1940, the air in the French town of Stonne was thick with tension. In the heart of this quiet, a lone figure stood resolute. The French Char B1, a behemoth weighing 28 tons, was not the pinnacle of tank design. It was underpowered, often unreliable, and in the face of the German blitzkrieg, it seemed almost archaic. But as the sun rose on that May morning, Captain Billotte knew this was all they had. It had to be enough. Unbeknownst to him, a company of German Panzers, the pride of the Wehrmacht, was advancing towards Stonne. The Char B1, with its formidable armor, stood as the town's unlikely guardian. The Germans, confident in their swift and decisive campaign, were about to encounter a surprise that would shake their convictions. As the two forces converged, a palpable unease unsettled the German ranks at the sight of the French tank. Myths of an easy victory in France were about to be shattered. A single tank, led by a man of unyielding courage, was about to challenge an entire German Panzer company. In 1919, French Army General Jean-Baptiste Etienne got the idea for a native-made battle tank capable of breaking through enemy lines, destroying fortifications, and demolishing tanks. While 5 national companies submitted their proposals to the Army, top brass decided that the future tank would be based on a joint design from Renault and Schneider. The new tank, the Char, or Tank B1, was conceived only a few years after World War I as an infantry support tank with a heavy assault role. This char de combat would tackle enemy fortifications, artillery, and tanks head-on, aiming to push through every other enemy vehicle with superior firepower and, most importantly, armor. The resulting design had massive tracks as tall as the tank's hull to ford trenches quickly, a heavy 75mm howitzer, and a smaller 47mm gun for hunting tanks. Additionally, there were machine guns in the turret and hull for close defense against infantry. But the most notable detail in the Char B1's design was a powerful armor that left it virtually without major weak points. With an outstanding 55 to 60mm of armor on all sides, other contemporary tanks, like the Panzer III and IV, had half this protection. But despite overmatching its peers in firepower and armor, the B1 had significant flaws. For starters, the B1 could only achieve a maximum speed of 17 miles per hour, while other nations' models typically averaged 25 miles per hour. A B1's brave commander had to shout verbal commands to his crew, and depending on the rank, other tanks in his unit. They would also have to aim and fire the smaller gun in the turret, reload the weapon, and start all over again, a demanding job even for the greatest of leaders. And while German Panzers all had excellent radio communications, allowing commanders great tactical and operational control, Char B1s, with rudimentary radio, had to resort to transmitting simple commands via Morse code. After nearly a decade and a half, in 1937, the B1 was finally ready to enter production. About 400 Char B1 were manufactured, with each individually named after a French town, colony, or sometimes wine. The French tank entered service just in time for the ultimate test. By the time the phony war ended and France entered World War II in April 1940, the Army had only 4 battle tank battalions, or BCCs, each with 33 B1 tanks. When major ground operations began against the Free French in May, 2 BCCs each served in 3 reserve armored divisions intended to support the infantry. A final 4th DCR was hastily formed under the command of General de Gaulle and independent companies for supporting infantry formations. However, these DCRs were gravely lacking in logistical and repair services, a weakness only further hindered by the Char B1 tank's high fuel consumption and frequent breakdowns. As German air's dominance caused the French logistical system to collapse even more, Char B1s had to be abandoned for lack of fuel or necessary repairs and were destroyed in combat. Because the infantry regiments also lacked motorized transport to keep up with the large tanks, often the B1s roamed ahead into battle without any infantry support. By May 13, 1940, the German planned invasion of France had crossed the Meuse River deep into the heart of France, taking both the French and British by surprise by successfully navigating through the difficult, hilly, and rough terrain of the Ardennes forest. The first French encounter using FCM-36 light tanks resulted in the loss of 24 out of 34 models. But there was a silver lining to this carnage. As the Wehrmacht headed west, they left an extended flank poorly defended and open to attack. Realizing this was the opportunity they needed, the French army quickly sent 2 battalions of their heavy tanks, the Char B1, straight into the vulnerable German flank, right by the village of Stonne. The village of Stonne, situated atop a ridge, was the epicenter of the French and German fight during mid-May. At full strength, the French army division in the area boasted just over 60 of the Char B1 heavy tanks. But due to mechanical problems and battle casualties, only 34 were available by noon on May 14, 1940, for the planned counterattack. By that evening, only 29 remained. But despite this low number, the French knew this was their only chance to make themselves heard. On May 15th, the unfortunately located village changed hands several times as French troops attempted to stem the tide of German armor. Throughout the day, 3 squadrons of Stuka dive bombers ravaged Stonne, adding to the destruction raining on it from French and German artillery. The morning after, Panzer 3Es and 4Ds, then the best tanks in German service, were deployed to stave off a French counterattack. But the French tanks, and most importantly their crews, were determined to put up one hell of a fight. At 5 in the morning on May 16, 1940, a company of the Wehrmacht 8th Panzer Regiment was arranged in an ambush position along one of the many nearly destroyed rubble streets of the French town of Stonne, ready for any French vehicles that may come their way. Suddenly, a massive green tank lumbered around a street block directly before the Panzer unit. This was Air, a Char B1 tank commanded by its fearless captain Pierre Billotte, an endeared commander from a long line of military men within his family. Billotte knew that with 60mm of armor and 2 large guns, a 47mm and a 75mm, his tank was a nightmare for the Germans. Tired of the carnage from the days before, he and his men were determined to take over Stonne. The French crew readied themselves for the attack. Inching closer and closer, Sergeant de Rupt, Air's driver, triggered the larger howitzer fixed in the front hull and made it roar loudly, successfully smashing a Panzer III on the rear of the column. Before the Germans even realized what was happening, Billotte swiveled the smaller high-velocity cannon in the turret and hit the lead tank, a mere 100 feet away, to prevent the group from dispersing. Now filled with adrenaline, Billotte and his men began to knock out all the remaining tanks one by one, adding to their tally and destroying 7 enemy vehicles without any losses to the French tanks. But there was still a lot of work to do. Thankfully, they were safe inside their armored behemoths. Billotte's tanks drove east along a road that led out of the village until they reached a junction where more German tanks were stationed. Once again, Air and its men trapped the Panzer Company in a head-to-head confrontation. There, hundreds of rounds cracked from the long barrels of the Panzer III tanks and the stubbier guns of Panzer IV tanks. While some cratered Air's armor, they quickly darted off the French tank. All the while, Billotte coolly blasted one Panzer after another, destroying 6 more. Following their second encounter, as they drove further along the road, they encountered a cleverly concealed German anti-tank gun, and the French put it out of action. After adding 1 more anti-tank weapon to their tally, the Char B1 Air returned to the village of Stonne. Commander Billotte's Morning of Doom officially tallied up 2 Panzer IVs, 11 Panzer IIIs, and 2 PAK-36 anti-tank guns belonging to the German 10th Panzer Division. However, the leader claimed to have knocked out 1 more. When the Air tank was examined after the battle, Army men found over 140 shell hits all over the vehicle, but not a single enemy round pierced the tank's armor. The 1940 fight between the French and the Germans in Stonne has often been compared to the hell of Verdun in 1916 during World War I. However, for the very first time since the beginning of World War II, the Wehrmacht had encountered a tank that could completely outmatch their own. On the other side of the fight, thanks to outstanding leadership from Billotte, who more often than not had to yell out his commands to his men, the group felt secure under their less than perfect but powerful tank. Leon Honor, a member of the crew of the Char B1, recalled, quote, "We just had to eliminate them and then move on. 1 shot did the job. I carried on driving forward, firing the 75mm cannon as we went. Inside the Char B, we were very confident that the armor would keep us safe from danger or injury. Out of all of Billotte's unit's tanks, only 1 was lost. 1 was damaged after driving into a gully, and 2 broke down due to mechanical issues." The same morning, a fellow Char B1 tank, Reykjavik, charged into a column of Wehrmacht infantry, and it was so effective, the German 64th Schützen Regiment panicked and fled an entire sector of Stonne. By 7 a.m., the French town of Stonne was back under French control, staying like this for the rest of the day. After May 16, 1940, Both the Germans and the French withdrew their armored forces from the exposed Stonne Ridge, with the 10th Panzer Division continuing to the English Channel. Between the 15th and 18th of May, the village of Stonne changed hands nearly 20 times. The losses of 33 French tanks and 24 German Panzers, half of those from Billotte's unit, underscores the importance of holding the strategic position in the heart of France. Despite his brave and surprising actions, Billotte's feat could not save the already beleaguered French forces, and soon after, France surrendered to Germany. But the French tanks had left their mark. Even legendary General Heinz Guderian noted their performance, recalling, quote, "All the shells I fired at it simply bounced harmlessly off its thick armor. We inevitably suffered sadly heavy casualties." After the fall of France, Billotte was arrested and imprisoned by the Germans, only to escape a year later and join the Free French units for the remainder of the war. Following the fall, a victorious Germany employed over 161 captured Char B1s, overhauled and designated Panzerkampfwagen B2 740. Throughout the remainder of the war, some were used in the invasion of Russia, while others fought massive partisan armies in the Balkans. Under the personal consultation of the Führer, the German military and tank manufacturers were ordered to tinker with the French tanks. Of the captured models, 60 Char B1s had their hull-mounted howitzers replaced with powerful flamethrowers on flexible mounts. These Frankensteined French-German tanks first saw action in the 102nd Flame Tank Battalion, assaulting Soviet border fortifications in western Ukraine in June 1941. 2 of these were knocked out, and the unit suffered so many breakdowns that it had to be withdrawn from action the following month. Following this, the flame tanks were upgraded, and the modified vehicles were part of the siege of Sevastopol in the summer of 1942, again with little success. Throughout the war, 16 French-German B1s had their turrets ripped off and were replaced with 105mm howitzers enclosed with an armored cab to serve as self-propelled artillery. In the summer of 1944, as the German forces fell slowly, Allied troops encountered B1s in the battles of Normandy and Holland. By this time, however, the Char B1 tank, despite the modifications, was outgunned and outclassed by other models. By 1945, French resistance fighters managed to get their hands on a handful of the abandoned heavy tanks and were able to use them in the liberation of Paris. Facing limited anti-tank defenses, once again, the French Chars blasted German pillboxes in Saint-Georges-de-Didonne, which surrendered in April 1945.